Welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and we have a very special show for you today. Truth is, a couple weeks ago, Saturday, I flew in with my wife for our 25th anniversary into Israel on October 7th. And when we flew in, we had no idea, because there was no Wi-Fi on the plane, that 1,000+ missiles had been just fired from Gaza into Israel. We had no idea. We were picked up from the airport. Everybody seemed fine, calm, cool, collected. Got to the hotel, which was right next to the embassy, by the way, which, by the way, vacated immediately. It closed down, right? And so we were at the hotel, but everything's cool. Matter of fact, we were fine. But clearly, we were hearing the echoes of the missiles in the Iron Dome, every day, every night, every afternoon. We'd be outside on the veranda. You hear them. You're looking over the water, you hear it as helicopters rolling by. And I've never been in the middle of a war. It's the first time I'd ever been in one, right? And I know for us, we just said, you know what? We're going to make the best of it. We're going to do what we can do. And you know what? We even took a 7-mile walk through Tel Aviv while this is all going on with a couple friends and just made the best of it. Well, Israel's in a war that is unique because the enemy that they face is a unique enemy. This isn't a standard type of war. Honestly, Hamas is an enemy like another, and you can include Hezbollah in that. They both kind of are the same corporation, two different divisions. And there is a lot of questions about how do you lead when you face an enemy that makes no sense, or an enemy that is bent on your destruction, or an enemy that doesn't play by rules. How do you lead through that? Well, my guest here today, Major General John Gronski, he's retired Major General, has been through this situation, a similar situations. And he has agreed to come on the show and help us kind of make sense of leadership in this particular kind of conflict, and how you go about doing that, and how we can keep our calm and our confidence, and how do you lead when you face an enemy that's bent on your destruction? How do you lead when you face an enemy that doesn't play by those rules? That's tough. That's tough. But there are applications. And so we are inviting you today to kind of join us and do this. Typically, I would go through the 4 areas of your life: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. Typically, that's what we do. But we're going to do something a little different today. We're not going to do that today because I just feel like this topic is too important. So let me introduce Major General John Gronski. He currently serves as a senior mentor for the U.S. Army Mission Command Training Program, an adjunct fellow for the Center for European Policy Analysis, and president of Leader Grove, a leadership development and management consulting firm. He has served over 40 years in the United States Army and in the National Guard, and retired from the Army in June of 2019. In Ramadi in 2005, which is considered to be the bloodiest place on the planet, he led a brigade of 5,000+ soldiers, Air, Navy, Marine troops. He commanded the 28th Infantry Division, known as the Bloody Bucket, from 2012 to 2016, and he was Deputy Commanding General of the U.S. Army in Europe. General Gronski has completed Airborne School, Ranger School, Infantry Officer Advanced Course, U.S. Army War College. He's received so many military awards, decorations, including the Army Distinguished Service Medal with Oak Cluster, the Legion of Merit with Oak Leaf Cluster, Bronze Star, Iraq Campaign Medal, Combat Infantry Badge. The list goes on. He is a much sought after keynote speaker and leadership seminar facilitator. Listen, if you want to learn more about my friend, General John Gronski, you need to go to johngronski.com. That's JohnGronski.com. And I want to welcome him to the show because he's a friend, he's a mentor, and I appreciate him. So, General, first of all, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, Jay, it's my pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the invitation. Hey, one correction on the
Sure,
introduction. Thank you for that gracious introduction.
sure.
I did step away from being a senior mentor for the Mission Command
Okay,
Training Program, so I just wanted to correct that. But
okay.
I really appreciate being here.
No, no, no. I'm so great. You and I have had some talks after, being on the show a couple times, and you graciously agreed to be here. And so I'm sure that's going to come up again in the AAR after the show. So, so it's all good. So I gave you this intro, the the Israel war with Hamas, and there's no face to Hamas. Israel has Netanyahu, right? And but Hamas doesn't have a face. When you're in that situation, how do you, as a leader, handle facing an enemy who has no face and yet is bent on your destruction?
Jay, I think it's like any type of challenge or adversity. And by the way, I mean, this is significant adversity for Israel. I'm not downplaying that at all. But whenever you're faced with this type of adversity, I think the first thing you really have to do is take stock in what are your core values. What are your national values, and take stock of those. And no matter what, you've got to stay true to those values. I think that's number one when you're facing an enemy like this, or really any adversity or challenge. And I think any leader listening could apply that to any situation they go through. But that is so important. And if you stray away from those values, I like to say, if you mortgage your values
Mm,
in order to get ahead, you only get behind.
mm.
So you really have to be clear-eyed on what your values are. And no matter how difficult it is, it's really important that you stay on course to keep aligned with those values.
How do you, or how did you, you know, when I was there and there was for 3 days, and I first got there and go into the hotel, and you know, I stand about 6 feet 4 inches tall, 240, and I come strolling into the room, uh, you know, but I could see fear in the eyes of people, and I'm sure you've experienced that, where you've seen fear in the eyes of your people. I saw fear where they were looking for any sense of hope at all. When you're faced with this kind of enemy, how do you deal with fear and how do you lead through fear?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's an old saying that courage is not the absence of fear, but it's the ability to overcome fear.
Mm,
And one of the best ways to do that is to understand what your purpose is and what you're really all about. Now, I could understand civilians, especially if there were civilians visiting from other countries, like you and your wife were. A lot of people come to Israel from many, many different countries. So obviously, that's a little bit different situation. I mean, here you have people caught up in something that they never expected to be caught up in. But you've just got to focus on overcoming that fear in various ways. For the brigade that I led over in Ramadi, I mean, one of the ways to overcome that fear is to really understand what your purpose is. So it was a little bit different for us because we understood that our purpose for conducting combat operations in Ramadi was to protect our families, our friends, and all Americans back at home. But it's really understanding what your purpose in life is in order to be able to overcome that fear.
It's interesting that you say that. We had this, my wife had been planning this thing for a year, and for our 25th wedding anniversary. And she was bent that we were going to go to Galilee and we were going to get remarried again and redo our vows, and that we were going to get baptized in the Jordan. She was bent that we were going to do that on that Tuesday. And we even met with our guide who, was IDF, right? And we met with our guide, showed up, and he said, yeah, we may be able to go to the northeast side of Israel and still make that happen. And then, of course, Monday rolled around and he was under fire. And I'm still in contact with him on my WhatsApp, right? Because he's still contacting me, telling me he's under fire, and they're still coming. And then he says, we're not going to be able to go out. And then, of course, our hotel shuts down in uh, Tiberias. So situation had changed, right, immediately. So when that happens, right, the truth of the matter is we felt like we had first had a purpose, but then when that changed, we felt that we had to make a different, we had to pivot.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to pivot in a positive way. We weren't going to pivot out of fear. We just, we're going to pivot in a positive way. We set everything up. How do you get people when you're in the middle of a situation? Because there's no rhyme or reason to why war occurs and how that happens. How do you get people to pivot as a leader and maintain a positive attitude?
Yeah. Well, we all have plans as humans, right?
Right.
But we have to realize that sometimes God has a different plan, and we have to be willing to accept that. So obviously, God
I get
had
it.
a different plan than what your wife had. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
God's
yeah,
plan trumps your wife's plan.
yeah.
So you just have to understand that, and it is. I mean, it is about showing some resiliency, showing the resolve to overcome those, the adversity that we face, and remaining positive, having that positive mindset, having a growth mindset. Knowing that, I like to say when I talk about leadership, I talk about leaders being optimistic, and how I define that is leaders have to believe that tomorrow is going to be better than today, but they have to have a believable plan to go along with that optimism. I mean, you just can't be a Pollyanna leader looking out of rose-colored glasses, telling everybody, "Hey, tomorrow's going to be better." You've got to have a plan to go along with that. And it sounds to me like you and your wife were able to develop as you mentioned, a positive plan.
Yes, we did.
To focus on what you really traveled overseas for, and that was, your celebration, your personal celebration, and figuring that out. But again, I think leaders in times of crisis have to show that optimism. They have to communicate to their followers that, hey, we're in tough times right now, but we're putting a plan together, and this plan is going to allow tomorrow to be better than today, and then communicate that and communicate the purpose and all of those things. I mean, that, leaders don't have to be great all the time, but they have to be great when it matters.
Right.
And, in these crisis situations, that's when leaders need to step up and be great.
Yeah. Let's shift to the conflict in Israel and Gaza, because we have Netanyahu, who we're going to talk about a little bit here, and from a leadership standpoint and what he's doing. But how do we analyze the leadership of Hamas? How do we take analysis of that helps us to understand how they are led? Is there a way we can do that from your experience?
I think you have to look at the stated purpose of Iran, and of course, Hamas is a proxy of Iran, and their stated purpose is the destruction of Israel. I mean, that's their stated purpose, and that's what they're hell bent on achieving. Unfortunately, they're an evil in this world, and it's hard to get into the mind of a guy like a Hitler, right?
Right.
It's hard to get into the mind of an organization like Hamas, where they're just hell bent on evil, and there's very, very hard to have a negotiation with them. But that's their stated purpose. That's what they're focused on. I mean, in Gaza, that's what they've been spending the last over 10 years doing, is preparing for these type of attacks, creating that tunnel system within Gaza. When you have an evil in the world like that, it's hard to understand why they've got that purpose, but unfortunately they do, and I think we have to understand that.
Well, I'm just thinking about it, and I agree. I'm just thinking about this from the standpoint of how do they organize to lead themselves, right? Is there some, typically, like I said, we see Netanyahu, right? And then he has everything else. Who who's the organizational leader? Is there one? Is there a decision maker? How is that? Because I don't mean to say like it's haphazard, but it does feel a little haphazard, as far as Hamas is concerned. But how are they? What is the leadership style? I'm trying to figure it out. So maybe you could help me out here a little bit.
Yeah, my understanding is they do have a stated leader. I'm not sure. I can't tell you by name who that person is, but I just saw a blurb on the news this morning where the leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah actually met, and they're for sure aligning with that stated purpose of destroying Israel. So, they do have a chain of command, if you will. But again, like most terrorist groups, they work in cells, and it's pretty hard to cut the head off the snake because they morph. And that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to conduct a conventional operation against terrorist cells. It's almost impossible to do that. It really comes down to having great intelligence, taking time to put the pieces together, and then being able to carry out precise operations using asymmetric means, which means using special operations forces. That's really, I think, the best way to deal with terrorist groups like that. Pretty hard to go in with a conventional force and find the bad guy.
Yeah, this has been an issue because it's almost like you don't know who it is.
Sure.
I mean, that's what it feels like. Like you don't know. I am as I'm like everyone else. I don't want to see innocent people killed. I don't. Right. But we don't know who that is. Right. And I have to believe on the Israel side, right, which seems like they're playing fair to me. I mean, they're telling the people, hey, this is where we're going to go, so get out. I mean, it's kind of how it seems to me. And you and I talked before the show. They're probably not doing a real great job of controlling their own narratives and being able to actually get things out appropriately into the world. But this enemy is like a starfish. They keep, you cut off a leg of a starfish, they grow back. That's how it feels.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it's pretty hard to annihilate a terrorist element like Hamas. I think the best thing for Israel, and I know a lot of Israelis and friends of Israel may not want to hear this, but I think that their main focus should be on number one, protecting their citizens. Number two, really working on intelligence so they could find out where these hostages are being held and conducting precision operations to rescue the hostages once they locate them. And I know that's a big challenge. Obviously, they don't know where they are being held. And then, rooting out specific Hamas terrorists, again, based on intelligence. There's probably still Hamas terrorists within Israel. Mm-hmm. So to find out where they are and to root them out and kill them. And if there's some actionable intelligence which would allow them to conduct raids or precision strikes into Gaza, specifically to take out those Hamas terrorists, that's what you have to do. There's a lot of missiles, still attacking Israel from Gaza. Mm-hmm. The key is, are you able to find out where those points of origin are in a timely manner where you could actually destroy those systems that are firing missiles into Israel? It does no good to pound dirt once a system in Gaza, fires a missile and then displaces. And then if the Israelis try to attack that point of origin and there's no longer a system there, all they're doing is pounding dirt and perhaps killing innocent civilians. And there's just no good in that. And you've got to be able to use the restraint necessary. Something Thucydides said over 2,000 years ago, Thucydides was an Athenian general, and he said, of all the manifestations of power, restraint impresses men most. And I really think, as hard as it is to do, based on, the values of the state of Israel, they've really got to be focused on not harming civilians within Gaza, because not every civilian within Gaza is a terrorist.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. We're talking with General John Gronski, and we're talking. We're also incorporating his great book. By the way, this is a fabulous book, Iron Sharpened Leadership. I really suggest that you get yourself a copy. I don't care what you do. I don't care what stage of life you're in. I'm telling you, I've read this book twice. I went back again and read it before the show again. I'm just telling you, it's a great book, Iron Sharpened Leadership. Get yourself a copy. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, Epic Physical Therapy, whether you're recovering from injury, surgery, or suffering everyday aches and pains, having difficulty performing activities of daily living, professional athletes or athletes, you're just looking to improve and move and make your sport better. If you want a customized treatment for you, that's what they will do. It's absolutely customized to you. When you're ready for your epic relief, your epic recovery, epic results, do not look any further. Go to epicpt.com. That's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors, for nearly 39 years, they have helped people transition in life. I know it's a real estate company, but think about this. Every place that you've ever lived has been a transition in life, and they have done that for thousands of people. And they would like to do that for you because they help take the stress and so many emotions out of the largest personal purchase you're probably going to make in a lifetime. So when you're ready to sell your home or buy your next home, start with Linda Craft Team Realtors. It's real easy. Just go to lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with General John Gronski, Major General John Gronski, U.S. Army retired. And we're talking about the Israel-Hamas war, and we're also weaving in elements from Iron Sharpened Leadership, his outstanding book. It's absolutely fantastic. And I've seen you out on the road speaking, and you seem like you're very busy, and people are singing all sorts of praises about the book. How's that part been going? Has it been very successful for you? Have you been able to achieve the goals that you had in your mind in terms of getting the word out about Iron Sharpened Leadership?
Yeah, I like to say, I rely on God to help me have the grace, have the strength to get a good, positive word out there that will help leaders. And my purpose is to help leaders who want to improve to become better leaders. I mean, that's what it's about. I have been on the road a lot. I've been in Texas, I've been in Florida, New Jersey. A cool thing just happened. I did a speaking engagement for a large company in the Philadelphia area. And one of the people who were listening to me speak actually just bought a copy of my book, Iron Sharpened Leadership, and had me mail it out to Montana because his daughter is a young enlisted airman. And it was really cool that, he read my book, he heard me speak, and then he wanted his daughter, who, as I mentioned, is in the Air Force, to be able to read the book. So, that made me feel really good. It makes you feel like, what you're saying, what you're writing is really having a positive impact on people. So that's going well. And then real quick, I also rolled out some online leadership training. So if people go to my website, they get, they don't have an opportunity to hear me speak in person. They could actually enroll in an online leadership training course. I have several courses out there, and that's been going really well. So I'm just very blessed, and I appreciate you asking about that, Jay.
Yeah, and also I would also tell you, listeners and viewers, by the way, if you're watching us on DBTV all over the world, I would subscribe to the email list. You have an email. I subscribe to it, and I get these little tidbits that come through regularly about leadership and leadership things and different ways to think and how to approach the way we do leadership. And I find them beneficial. I read them. I know I am one of those people who read the emails. I do that, but they're fantastic. So I really recommend all of you not only get a copy of the book. You should do that. Is it, by the way, is it in audio yet?
Yes, it is. It's on Audible. Yeah.
So it is on Audible. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know what? I know some of you go, yeah, I don't want to read the book. Listen to it. Listen to it. You don't have to, if you don't like to read, get it on Audible. It's that easy. All right. So you have no excuses why you shouldn't. And if you've got young people, you know what, then and they don't want to read, then good. Get them the Audible version and have them listen to it. And then, you know, here's what you do, parents, with your children and books and listening to books. Don't have them listen to the whole book. Do it in sections and then talk about it.
Yeah.
Talk about it. What did you get? And don't make them they don't have to have a long soliloquy. This is what I tell my coaching clients. This is what I tell people I teach. If you could pull out maybe 3 things, 1's good, 2's awesome, but if 3 is amazing, but if you could pull out a couple things out of every time you listen that you could take home and then ask this question to your kids, how are you going to apply it? How can you make this happen in your life right now? That's when books change lives. And I believe in this book, and it does that. So there's a suggestion from Coach Jay of how to manage that piece of it for you and help your kids grow and learn, especially in leadership. So, General, let's talk next about Netanyahu and his leadership style and what you've seen from your perspective in terms of leadership and what he's doing. Let's start with what he's doing. Let's just start in general. What do you see him doing? What do you see him as a leader? How do you see him responding and acting?
Yeah, well, it's obvious that Netanyahu loves his country. I mean, he's been in various political positions for many, many years now. He's always been well-spoken. You know, he is conservative, and you know, he's doing what he feels is the best thing to do for his nation. I really do think. I already mentioned it. You know, I think de-escalation would be the way to go. You know, the thing with people in political positions is, you know, unfortunately, they sometimes will make decisions based on what they think the best political advantage is. Now, I'm not saying Netanyahu is doing that because I don't have that type of insight on the decisions he's making, but I really think taking a different course would be the best approach for Israel. And, you know, obviously Israel is one of our greatest allies. I really think they're a fantastic friend of the United States, and I just want to see what's best for them. And I think with the bombing they're doing in Gaza, which has killed many, many civilians, really is not doing the country any good. But I think the way we have to look at political leaders, Jay, and I think the United States could take a lesson from this. You know, it's too divisive. You know, we sometimes make some of our political leaders appear like they're the devil incarnate. I mean, that's not true. I think anybody in the United States in political leadership is generally, I'd say 99% of them are trying to do what's best for our country. They have different views. And I think the same with Israel. You know, Netanyahu obviously has a lot of political opponents in Israel. We know for months and months now that they've been going through political turmoil. And some people think that's why Hamas decided to attack, because Israel seemed a little bit politically dysfunctional. So I think perhaps people sense some weakness there. But, you know, I think Netanyahu is a man who loves his country. He's trying to make the right decisions. And, you know, he's got advisors around him, of course, just as any political leader would have. But I don't have any particular insight into what is driving his decision-making process.
You said 2 things that just, well, one thing that opened up a mind is dysfunction, and then I immediately jumped to vulnerability. That you know, whether it's a war or whether you're in business, that if you are in dysfunction, you become vulnerable.
Yeah.
So let's talk about let's talk about that, because that's a real world issue for many people who are CEOs or business ownership entrepreneurs. Is dysfunction creates vulnerability. So how do we guard ourselves as leadership to make sure that we're not headed dysfunctional, or we not become dysfunctional, so that we're not vulnerable?
Yeah. Yeah. You're using the word vulnerability. I'll use the word weakness.
Okay.
I think that type of political dysfunction does make a country weaker,
Mm.
and whether it's real or perceived. And I do think perhaps the enemies of Israel perceived that there was a weakness there that they could take advantage of. That's why, again, I'm so oh I'll use the word disappointed in what is going on in our country as well, with the political dysfunction we're seeing in Congress. Trying to select a speaker. It does not do the country any good. At some point in time, political leaders, even with diverse views, have to come together for the good of the country.
Mm.
And it's about negotiating. It's about stating what our views are, but being able to negotiate and have civil conversations and civil discourse for the good of our nation. And I think that's a lesson many democracies should really be learning from what we've seen going on over the last number of months in both Israel and the United States.
I I could not agree more with you on this. I'm thinking about this dysfunction, and then you use the word weakness here. Then what I start thinking of, General, is predators,
Yeah.
right? Because then I'm just an old farm boy. so I'm thinking about, when an animal shows weakness, predators show up pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
And if there's a dysfunctional chaos that creates weakness in a herd, predators show up again pretty quickly. We have coyotes and wolves out in the Midwest, and so I guess I want you to talk about uh, that guarding. As a leader, how do I guard myself from allowing that dysfunction or allowing that weakness to occur? What is it that I need to do to protect that? What does my awareness have to be
Yeah.
to
Well,
protect against that?
Jay, I'm not a politician, so I have a hard time talking about these political realities that do exist. But
Not
from a
for any,
very,
not
very
for any business. It
yeah,
doesn't.
from a very, very base tactical perspective, I mean, whenever we had a patrol out in Ramadi, we always said if the patrol demonstrates strength by the way they're just demonstrating strength by being alert, by looking sharp, by having their weapons oriented in the right directions, by all of those things, which you could imagine a patrol that where the soldiers look strong and they're doing the right thing, they're acting professional, they're demonstrating strength. You could have another patrol where the leadership isn't that good. They're the soldiers might be lazy, their weapons might be pointed downward, whatever the case might be, and there's some weakness displayed by a patrol like that. So we always said you've got to demonstrate strength. And I think the same is true for any organization. And one of the ways you demonstrate strength is by the leaders being able to unite the people and build a team and make an emotionally safe environment within the organization that particular leader might lead. And here I'm talking about business.
Sure. Yeah.
A leader has to be a team builder, and one of the ways to build a team is by creating a culture where people feel like they belong. Nobody is being ostracized. Nobody is being neglected. Everybody feels like they're being heard. and everybody understands the standards. And this is another important thing, Jay. Some leaders have a hard time, and I found this in business, working at higher levels with senior VPs and that type of thing. I've noticed that some business leaders are really good at stating what the standard is, but when it comes to enforcing the standard, they fail. They don't have the personal courage to enforce standards. And I believe when a leader doesn't enforce standards, they're actually destroying trust within that particular organization. And this is what happens when a leader doesn't enforce standards. The low performers in that organization will stay because the standards aren't being enforced, and the low performers are okay with that. And then the high performers will dribble away little by little. And so it's really some leaders think, I don't want to enforce the standards because I'm going to lose people. Hey, guess what? The people you're going to lose are going to be the low performers anyway. High performers will stay if standards are enforced. High performers will leave if standards are not being enforced. Plus, it's going to degrade trust in an organization. So I kind of pivoted over here to providing some guidance to leaders who are leading an organization, leading a business unit. But it's true, and I think you could really, look at that, even from a national resiliency level as well.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I something jumped into my head as you were speaking, and I started thinking about how important is it from a leadership standpoint to be so aware, have self-awareness of what's really going on,
Oh my God.
not what you think is going on, but what's really going on.
Yeah, and the way you have to do that, and I like to use the term muddy boots leader. It's been known as management by walking around. I like to call it muddy boots leadership, but that's really getting out there, looking people in your organization in the eye, and actually getting an understanding of how they're feeling. I think the best way to do that is to engage people. I was talking to a senior VP from a national rental company, and he said his technique. And again, it was a national rental company. So his technique is when he would go to visit a rental store, the first thing he would do would be, instead of engaging the people in the showroom, he would go to the back of the building where the people who would receive product were back there, the people who would maintain equipment were back there, and he would spend time talking to them first, because they were the support people. They were the people who really got visited. People out in the showroom were always getting, attention and love. So he would go to those folks first and really engage them, find out what obstacles were in their way that he, in his position of authority, might be able to remove those obstacles, or find out what resources they needed so he, in his position of authority, could possibly provide those resources to those people. And that is just a great way to cultivate and grow trust in an organization.
And I, this is okay, this is where, listen, I'm not a politician. First of all, not enough people would vote for me because because I stand on my principles, and that might be a problem as a politician. I just threw that out there. But one of the things that we don't see in politics is muddy boots leadership.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, when, and this is where it goes back to, are you really, do we move into a dictatorship of this is, this is my values, this is what I think, and so this is the way it's going to be? Or have you really walked out there and said, oh my gosh, we're a little dysfunctional here. We have a huge divide, and we don't have a big enough bridge.
It seems as though politicians get around and see people when they're running for re-election. But I would like to see them get out there prior to the election season starting and really get out there and engage people and see what the heck is going on and get a good look at it. The interesting thing is, we talk about, in the Army, the Army is really focused on leadership training, and law enforcement, I think, needs to get that way. And I often think the ones who really need to go to leadership training, and perhaps it should be some type of mandatory requirement, are chief executives of municipalities. I'm talking about mayors, or I'm talking about chief executives of states. I'm talking about governors, those type of people, God bless them, but some of them may never have gone through what we would consider leadership training. Many of them really don't understand how to lead. And I think it's important that those chief executives really understand what their role as a leader is.
I'm just throwing this out, General. Are you willing to do a course for, municipality people in municipalities? Are you willing to do a course for them on leadership training?
Well, I'm doing a lot of work with law enforcement all throughout the country, because I do think law enforcement, I think some of the issues we saw with law enforcement over the last several years really had to do with poor leadership. And I do a lot of leadership training for law enforcement now, and I would love to do leadership training for what I call chief executives of municipalities, of local government. I think that's needed.
I could not agree more. I think it's going to start here, and then we got to move it out. His name is Major General John Gronski, retired. His book, Iron Sharpened Leadership. We are weaving in Hamas, Israel, business. We're just covering it all because we can. All right. And we're enjoying it. And you know what? Thanks for tuning in and watching us. We're going to be back on a new direction right after this. Hey, folks, Epic Physical Therapy facilities offer the most advanced top-of-the-line equipment like the Ultra G anti-gravity treadmill, the Normatec compression sleeves. My favorite, Game Ready, that's ice and compression all at the same time. That's just a few. Listen, they're trained and certified in the most comprehensive, cutting-edge treatments available like blood flow restriction therapy, cupping, dry needling, and that's just a few. So listen, when you're ready for your epic relief, your epic recovery, your epic results, don't look any further. Go to epicpt.com. It's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors for more than 38 years. They've been helping people all over the world transition in their life. Every home you've ever lived in, every apartment you've ever lived in, it's been a life transition. You can point to the different points in your life, right? Well, that's what they do. What they do is they help people transition in life. And how they do that is they take the stress out of it. They've been helping thousands of people reduce the stress. They have everything in front of them. They know how to help the step-by-step processes to make that process as smooth as possible. So listen, when you are ready to sell or buy your home and you want it to be smooth and you want to take the stress out of it, just go to Linda Craft Team Realtors. Listen, they're experts in it, 38 plus years, still going. You can just find them at lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with General John Gronski, retired from the U.S. Army. His book, Iron Sharpened Leadership, available, by the way, on Audible, which I did not know until today. But it's awesome. Did you read for the book, by the way? Did you do the reading of it?
No, I didn't. I've talked to some people who said they wish I had read it, but I did not. But still, the professional reader who read the book is awesome, and I think people would enjoy it.
I think you have a great voice for it, by the way, General. I did two of my books. So two of my books, I went into studio and read for them. And by the way, it was work. I'm not going to lie to you. It was some work. But I think you have a great voice. Now, listen, I have a face for radio, and yet I'm on TV. So, I mean, there's that whole thing there too. All right, so let's talk about one of the things. I'm just going to jump back and forth here as we're kind of doing in this Israel war. The guy who is actually going to renew our vows in Israel and was going to baptize us in the Jordan is in the IDF. And he did he's got his gear on, he's got his weapon, and he's coming to us from wherever his undisclosed location is. And he mentions that they were able to get 330,000 forces together in 24 hours.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's a leadership thing to me.
Yeah.
How?
Well, the thing is, Jay, in Israel, they primarily rely on their reserve forces. And so, they're constantly doing exercises to call up the reserves. So it's no surprise to me that they were able to call up 330,000 reservists in a matter of a day or two. I mean, that's how they operate. They understand that they're in a bad neighborhood. They've got a lot of enemies in that neighborhood, and they've got to be ready to go. And they're a country that really relies very, very heavily and primarily on their reserve force.
And you know what speaks to me, and I'm going to go back to resiliency. And in your book, which is the third section of the book, one of the quotes that you say is, a resilient person is the type of person who meets challenges head on and wins. Optimism and enthusiasm are two key traits of resilience. And I have to tell you, in this video with Chaim Mailspin, who was doing the video, you saw both of those things. It was optimism and enthusiasm. I mean, he was firmly entrenched, saying, listen, we're shepherds. That's how he saw it. He said, we're just shepherds who are protecting the sheep. That's how he saw it. And it was, and under the circumstances, here's this optimistic, enthusiastic guy, you know, geared out, ready to go. And yet it just seems so critical to have those two pieces in resiliency. Explain why they're so important.
Yeah. Well, you know, Colin Powell said optimism is a force multiplier. You know, people look to leaders in times of crisis, and it's the demeanor that the leader displays, which is going to trickle down to the people they lead. And obviously over in Ramadi, we went through some very tough times over there. And, you know, as the brigade commander, I realized that I had to have that optimism. I had to have that positive mindset, because the soldiers and Marines I led were relying on me to display that type of attitude. People don't want a leader that's going to throw up their hands and say, oh, we're doomed. You know,
Right.
People want a leader. And I said it before, and I think Zelensky was a great example of leaders being great when it matters. And again, I think if President Zelensky left Ukraine, you know, days after the Russians attacked his country, Kyiv probably would have fallen in about a week. But he stayed there. He was able to inspire his people, and again, they continue to battle against that terrible Russian attack. And I think the leaders in Israel have to do the same thing. And I will tell you this about the IDF. You know, I've met a good number of IDF soldiers. Their training is very Spartan. They really believe in their cause to protect their homeland, to protect their country. As a matter of fact, I've met several Americans who traveled back to Israel to serve in the Israeli Defense Force. I mean, that's how dedicated they are to protecting their state of Israel. So you don't discount the attitude and the resolve that the Israelis have to defend their country. But again, I think they really need to be focused on doing the right things in accordance with their values, rather than just lashing out. Because of course they're hurt, they're angry, they're distraught over this terrible attack that Hamas waged on their country. You know, well over 1,000 Israelis were killed in that attack. Well over 200 people, civilians primarily, were taken hostage. I mean, obviously, any country is going to feel very, very much pain over that. You know, it's similar to how we felt on September 11, 2001. And we have to remember how we felt back then. But again, a country with the values of countries like the United States, with the values of Israel, like the values of many of our other democratic allies out there, we have to understand what our values are, and we've got to respond in accordance with our values, no matter how difficult that is. And the same goes for us as individuals. We have to really understand truly what our values are, what our core values are, and then we've got to conduct ourselves in accordance with our core values and make personal decisions in accordance with our core values. And I think that's where some people go wrong, and I think that's where some countries go wrong. If they really aren't focused on what their core values are, and they don't make decisions in accordance with those values, that's where they could go off course. And don't you think that's so important, Jay? We talk a lot about values. So how do you use values? Well, one of the ways you're supposed to use values is when you're going to make a decision, whether it be a personal decision or an organizational decision or a national decision, you should factor your core values into your decision-making process. I think if you do that, it's going to keep you on azimuth and keep you functioning in accordance with those values.
It's supposed to be a filter.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
that's how I see values. I mean, first of all, what's interesting is when I ask people, what are your core values? I am shocked how many people really can't give me an answer.
You're exactly right.
Or they give me a standard answer. Well, integrity. Right? What does that really mean to you? Right. Right. I mean, so I'm always amazed that people don't really think through what their values are. And then secondly, that those values, whether it's personally, whether it's your company, whether it's a government, whatever those values are, then every decision has to be filtered through those values. That's how I see it.
You hit the nail on the head, Jay. And when I was in my late 20s, I went to hear a speaker talk, and she was talking about how her core values led to her being a successful chief executive officer of a company. And as I was driving home, I realized I never thought long and hard about what my core values are. So I came up with service, persistence, integrity, commitment, positive energy, and respect. Those are my stated core values. If anybody asked me what they are, I could tell them right away. And then the other key thing is you've got to link behaviors to those values. So in other words, okay, what are the behaviors associated with service? What does that really look like? Because service is kind of vague, isn't it? What the hell?
Yes.
What the heck does that mean?
Right.
So really identify what behaviors link to service, what behaviors link to persistence, what behaviors link to integrity. What does that look like? And companies could do this with their employees based on what their organization's values are. It's a great exercise to go through, and that way employees understand these are the behaviors I am expected to demonstrate if I'm going to be part of this organization, if I'm going to be part of that company. And a lot of people just fail to do that exercise.
I agree, and I cannot encourage it more. And by the way, it's talked about here in Iron Sharpened Leadership. Get the book, or you know what? How about this? Here's an idea, folks. Why don't you buy the book and then buy the Audible and then just read along? Okay, that would be a great idea because you're going to get a lot more out of it that way. General, we've done an hour. It's gone fast. You've been awesome, and thank you for being so gracious to be on this show. Again, let people know how they can reach you.
Yeah, people could reach me easiest by just going on my website, johngronski.com, as you mentioned a little bit earlier. And you mentioned they could sign up for the periodic leadership email that I send out. They could enroll in some of these online leadership courses that I've developed. And there's a lot of free leadership development material on my website, blogs, my YouTube channel. They could download a free leadership pamphlet. So just all kinds of stuff there. But that's the best way to get in touch with me is just go to my website, and you'll see my social media links there. You'll see my email address there, johngronski.com.
Awesome. Thanks, General. Stay with me. Hey, folks, you know what? This is a show I say that you're in control of three things. They're actually my core values. Your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. Right? You choose those regardless of your situation, right? You can have a positive attitude if you choose it. Your effort is linked to your excellence, right? So how excellent are you going to be today? And listen, we all get punched in the mouth from time to time. And there can be a hand trying to pull you up, but it's up to you to get up. So get up. I'm going to be back next week with another great guest. It's going to be another great book, which means it's automatically another great show. As I say to you all over the world, you had a lot of choices. You chose us. Thank you. I appreciate you. Give us a positive review. Thumbs up on YouTube. That would be awesome. And as I say to you all over the world, you know what that is. Ciao, everybody.